Well, hello everybody. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to flush out or descale a tankless water heater. This is something the manufacturer recommends you do annually, which is every year, especially if you're in an area with hard water or calcium or something like that in it. You got to clean out this heat exchanger, or that flow rate inside there is going to slow down and this thing will quit working. Most of them will tell you on their controller, it'll beep at you, give you an error code of CO or CL, which is telling you that it's time to clean it out. You will need some type of pump kit, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You can buy these at your plumbing supply house. It's got a pump, 2 little wash machine hoses, and a nice little bucket. There's also a descaling fluid. A lot of people say that you can use just household white vinegar, but if I was on a service call and I'm charging somebody to flush out their tankless water heater, I'm going to go ahead and buy the product that is specifically for descaling this water heater, just because I'm selling the homeowner a service. So let's get started. I'm going to get down here kind of close. I'm going to show you about these ports, these isolation valves, and then we're going to talk some more about our kit. Your isolation valves. Now, these are called isolation valves because you can turn both of these off and essentially isolate this water heater from the entire plumbing system. You don't have to turn off the water to the whole house, but by doing this, you will be turning off the hot water side. So just remember that. You will still have your hose bibs or your spigots outside if you need to wash anything off or anything like that. Plus, you got these 2 ports here if you need to get water. Now, typically on the outside, you're going to have a cover around this, and you're going to have to open that cover up. If you're working on an interior one, it's probably going to look similar to this. The ones on the outside with the covers, a lot of times people have had to turn your hot isolation valves to make up for this TMP, which is a temperature and pressure release. We call it that because that's the way it is on the conventional style water heaters. On a tankless water heater, it's temperature only. It's not for pressure. So what I normally like to do is give this a spin. As long as you watch that union, you should be all right. Now I've got both of my ports facing forward. You can open those ports up. This is where we're going to hook our hoses into. First thing, shut these valves off. You're going to want to turn those valves off. Then you're going to open your kit here, and it comes with some wash machine hoses. Most of the time, one of them has the male, and then one of them's got 2 females and female. You are going to hook these into your ports like so. Now, some of the heaters have a little plug up in there, a little wiring harness, and it says flush on it. This particular heater does not have that, but you're going to connect that. You're going to leave the power on. You're going to connect that when you do the flush. It's perfectly fine to leave the heater on, the gas on. You can let the water heater run while you're doing this. It's not going to hurt anything. And then you're going to have a little pump. Now, and then hook your cold side hose into the top of the pump. You're going to blow it through the cold side up through that heat exchanger and then return it back to your bucket with the hot side line. Now, you don't have to buy this kit. You can just get yourself a 5-gallon bucket and like a little goldfish pond pump. It would do about the same thing. But let me show you how this is going to sit down in your bucket. But here's your little bucket. You're going to have your pump down in there with its power cord, and then you're going to have the other end of your hose. And basically, you're just going to be recirculating this stuff through that heat exchanger. And I would recommend, like I said, getting the fluid that goes with it. They come in a small jug. It's concentrated, so you're going to want to mix it with water. Now, this is a brand new water heater. I don't need to descale it, so I'm not going to burn up a whole jug of this stuff. Like I said, a lot of plumbers will use just a couple gallons of white vinegar. Kind of does the same thing, but I would prefer using the one that is specifically for it, that has the buffers and it's biodegradable and all that stuff. To get things going here, remember we turned our main valves off. you've got two little valves at the top. You're going to want to go ahead and open those. And we've poured our concentrated mixture into our bucket down here. We're going to go ahead and fill our bucket up. And the easiest way to do that is let the water heater do it. Turn this cold water valve on, and it's just going to start filling your bucket up for you. You're going to want to fill it most of the way up. Not all the way, but most of the way. And then, of course, you can turn your water off. Now, my bucket's full. We're ready to roll. We got our valves open on the little service ports here. We've got our hot and our cold main valves off. So we're not circulating this stuff through the house. We're just circulating it through our water heater, only descaling our water heater, not putting this stuff all through the house. So the next thing you're going to do is plug your pump up. We have our pump running. Now, descaling a water heater is going to take you an hour. You're going to want to let this pump sit there and run for an hour to make sure it cleans all this stuff out. Now, if you left the power on and you had the gas on, this is probably going to kick on in a low fire mode, and that's perfectly fine. Once that water heats up to its desired temperature, the heater's going to stop running because it's sensing that incoming temperature is at whatever it's set at, say 120. So it'll run till it warms that water up in the bucket, but once it starts receiving that hot water, it's gonna shut down. Now, if you turned your gas valve off, but you left your water heater on, it's gonna try to fire up and you're gonna start getting some code 11s over there. It doesn't really matter, but for the most part, I leave all my stuff off and just let it go. Now, if you are using a water heater that's got that wire and harness that has the flush thing on it, you're going to snap that together, you're going to leave the power and the gas on, and you're going to let that controller, it's going to count down. It's going to start at 60, and then it's going to be counting down as you go, and it will beep at you and tell you when your time's up. It's pretty neat, and it'll also keep a record of the fact that that water heater has been flushed out. Now, you're sitting around here for an hour. If you're a service technician, you probably just charge somebody a whole bunch of money to come out and flush this thing out. Well, do your job. Don't just sit there. There's a couple things inside this heater you're going to do while you're waiting on that. So I'm going to take this cover off and we'll jump into that. In order to do this part of the service, you're going to need a nice long Phillips head magnetic screwdriver. And you're going to need an air compressor and one of these little blower things. What you're going to do here is you're going to be blowing any kind of bugs out of the system. Now, I got my little compressor back there, so while we're doing this, if it cuts on, be patient with me. But I typically, by blowing that vent out, just because you don't have to take anything apart to do that. But you're going to have to get to the fan motor. And how we do that is we've got to take the motherboard out. And most motherboards are sitting in a little cradle, very similar to this. You got one screw on the top up there, and then you got two little screws down here on the bottom. Now, I've done this quite a few times. If you've never done this before, if you're a plumber out there and you've never worked on tanklesses before, a lot of your tankless manufacturers, they'll do a seminar or class, and they're really neat. I highly recommend you going because they're specific to every model. And I'm about to lose my motherboard. You typically get something out of them, like this particular screwdriver. This is actually the one for this water heater. It's a ream screwdriver, believe it or not. Pull this motherboard out. We got our little flame rod here. It's the only connector we're going to pull off is the one that goes up here to the top. And then this whole controller motherboard will lay down right there. Here's your fan. Now, you can go ahead and get some of these other wire and harnesses out of the way. A mistake that a lot of the guys make is there's actually 6 screws on here. There's 3 inside screws and there's 3 outer screws. You're going to want to take those outside screws out. Now remember, when doing this, you're going to have the power off. You're not going to try to do this with the power on. And there goes my compressor. Hang on to your little screws. The worst part about these little screws is if you drop it down there in the pine straw or the leaves or something, you could lose them. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull these screws out. Got a little tension on it. You can undo that wiring harness if you want to. But be very careful with your little screws. Especially these ones on the inside because they're really hard to replace. And then you can pull your fan motor out, and it's just a little squirrel fan in there. It feels kind of weird because of the way the magnets and stuff in here are. And you're going to spin that. You're going to make sure that's spinning, turning. Gosh, at one time I had a dirt dauber build a nest on the side of this thing that kept throwing this weird code because the fan was out of balance. And I just had to go in there and knock that little dirt dauber off and then kind of wash off that little fan blade. But now you can get into here. You can take your compressed air, blow that out real good. And then, of course, you'd put it back together. All right, now this next part is the one that almost always gets neglected because nobody likes doing this. A lot of people are afraid to even mess with this. But we got to blow out our burner box. It's the last part of this job. And it's going to be all these little screws. Now, not the ones that are special. It's going to be all these little screws all around here. And you got to take them off. Not these on this plate, but the outer ones. A lot of your plumbers out there are afraid to do this, but I highly recommend getting some kind of tray or a cup or some kind of jug or something you can put these in because we're going to have a lot of screws here. Sometimes you're out in the field and you're trying to diagnose what's wrong with one of these things. They're going to ask you to open this burner box up. And it's like, hold on, let me call you back. If the core is leaking on the inside, they might ask you to pull this off to see what kind of damage it's done to the burner down there. It doesn't really matter how you take them off. You can take them out all you want to, but when you're putting these back together, it's kind of like changing a tire. You don't want to torque one side down really hard while you don't have any bolts in the other one. You want to kind of do it all evenly because there is a gasket behind here. But it's not so bad. It's just a bunch of little screws. And some are going to be hiding on you. But don't lose any of these screws. And don't do this with an impact. Gosh, these are little stainless steel screws in an aluminum housing. Are you going to strip the screw out? No, you're going to strip out the aluminum housing. The screw costs what, 3 cents? The housing costs a couple $100. So do not use an impact on these at all. I know it seems like that would be a lot easier on you, and electricians will love to hit things with their impact. But this is why you're dealing with this large magnetic screw driver. So you can get in there, get those little screws, and pull them out and be pretty safe about it. Now the whole time we're doing all this, my little flushing pump is down there steady running. We're going to be here for an hour. Might as well go ahead and do the full service on the thing. You'd be surprised, the ones that sit outside, how many bugs and beetles and nasty things can get inside of them. I even had a dead lizard skeleton. It was just a skeleton sitting inside of a fan motor one time where he got in there, thought it was nice and warm one night, and that morning apparently he got pretty beat up in that fan and got a call the water heater wasn't working, went over there, pulled that fan motor out, and there was a little lizard skeleton in there. Yes, be very careful. You don't have any extra ones. This little black thing over here I'm taking off, this is an igniter relay. This is what builds up the charge, and I just have to take that off. Remember, that's a special screw. A lot of these special screws are a different color just to signify where it goes, but you got to get out of that way to get to these last few here. And I'm really liking the way they built this one. They set this one up because it looks like I'm not going to have to pull the whole gas valve out, which is really nice. That's your gas valve down at the bottom. It looks like this is going to be the last one. Yeah, it turns out I'm going to have to take the gas valve off with, it's just 3-4 more screws here. But every brand of water heater is going to be different. They're all going to be different. Same parts now, it's all got the same components, but they are manufactured by different people. Should be 4 more screws down here to get our gas valve off. See why this one normally gets neglected? There she goes. All right, let's get these wires out of the way so you can see what's going on. Yeah, it's actually got 2 screws on the back side that was holding that front panel together. So there's about 6 screws there that I took out that I didn't have to. Pretty much the 4 on the gas valve down here and then all these around the top. But here's your burner box. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna blow this out. All right, let's go ahead and pull that burner box out. We're getting real in depth this go around. This turned out to be a little bit more than what I remembered. Like I said, they're all different. Rheem is kind of one of the older ones that we used to use a lot. We switched for several years and then now we've gone back. So just bear with me here. We got those 2 screws and then we got to pull these other larger ones out. Your flame rods and your igniters and all that should just stay right there. A lot of screws. There we go. She should just slide right on out. And there is our burner box. This is where our gas is coming in. Here's our igniter and our little flame rod or our flame sensor. Now, I've still got some wires hooked to this, but what you're going to do is pull that on out. That's your heat exchanger. Blow that out. Blow this out. And then you get to put it all back together. And it just slides back in there. It's got some rails in there. And it's going to run on and it's going to slide right back in there. Be careful with this plastic thing here. Don't get it pinched, don't tear it, don't cut it. This is your thermal overload protection. If this heater starts getting too hot, starts running away from us, this thing's going to pop and sever and the heater's going to shut itself down. This is a non-repairable or replaceable part. If you tear this, cut this, break this, damage this, the heater's done. You cannot repair that, you cannot replace that, and that's for safety reasons. It's a thermal overload or runaway protection is if this thing just keeps making hot water for some reason, it'll snap that and it'll shut everything down to it. All right, well, I'm gonna put my screws back together here, one at a time, just like I took it out. We got our burner box back together, and while I was putting this back together, I remembered something from one of the classes that you're not supposed to do. These bottom 3 screws here, you don't take those out because this thing, all these little burners, they're stacked in there like a deck of cards. You take these 3 screws out, it lets that loose. So I basically had to put my deck of cards back together and get these 3 screws back in there. The next step here is we're going to put our gas valve back together, our gas manifold, which is all these little ports that goes into that burner box. Now when putting this together, they have O-rings here. You should see this last one. I actually dropped this O-ring on the floor when I pulled it off of there. So you're going to want to make sure you put that O-ring back on there. Make sure you got all 3 of them. A lot of times they'll slide on and just kind of stick. You don't want to monkey around with this too much. You just want to go straight back in those holes. Keep an eye on that gas valve so that it goes back up there and that you didn't get any, none of your O-rings fell out. All right, and then with this, you're going to want to start at the bottom. Remember, don't get them so tight. You know, don't tighten down one side and then think you're going to tighten down the other side. You're just going to want to get them in there, and then you're going to do it like you change a tire or whatever. You're going to do one here, one there, one here, one there, one here, one there, one here. That way you're bringing that all down together, because like I said, remember, this is aluminum, and you can strip out that housing, and you do not want to do that, especially if you show up to somebody's house and you're just there to do a service, to clean a heater out, and now you've destroyed their water heater, and you're trying to talk them into buying a new one. Not fun. Or you could do like most service technicians do nowadays. They don't bother with all this stuff. They just want to sell you a brand new heater because it's easier for them to do, and it makes them a good bit of money. But if this heater still has a warranty on it, most heaters, water heaters have, or your tankless water heaters that is, you got a 1-year parts and labor warranty, where if you just bought it, typically whoever installed it is going to take care of that warranty for you, and the manufacturer will pay for that labor cost, and they'll send you out parts for free if anything happens in that first year. After that, you've got 5 years on parts. So they'll send you all the parts for free, but you're going to have to cover the warranty part, or the labor part, I'm sorry. Well, all right, I'm going to finish this up because I know this is real boring watching me do this. Now we're going to put our motherboard back in place. Watch these wires when you do that. Make sure you're not, this carriage thing or cradle isn't sitting on top of any of those wires. 3 bolts here on this guy, or screws, whatever you want to call them. I normally get that top one in just kind of started, and then you can move this cradle around to line those holes up. And then tighten that one the rest of the way down. This stuff here is just sensors for temperature, ambient temperature and stuff. This one does have a harness on it for, it's for a recirculator pump. It's already pre-wired for a recirculator pump. you'd stick that down through there and connect your pump to it. But don't have a lot of people ask for those. And then don't forget your flame rod. You took that little white connector off, put it back up in its little cradle. It should go back through these little tabs here, and then your upper thermistor, which is this thing up here sensing temperature. And then being really careful with that thermal protection, tuck it back in, put these little tabs back. This stuff is pretty flexible, but like I said, just be careful with it. Don't tear it, don't rip it, because if you do, your water heater's not any good anymore. And that's pretty much it. I know I've been here for an hour, so we can unplug our pump, shut these valves and everything off. Don't turn the water back onto the house yet, but I'm gonna put the cover back on, I'm gonna shut this pump down, and we're gonna finish the episode. All right, we've unplugged our pump. Now watch out, you're gonna have some water try to get out of this. And that cleaning solution, it's biodegradable, it's not anything that's hazardous. But you're gonna unhook your hoses, let that pour drip down out of there. You're gonna shut these valves off. Well, okay, now you've drained most of it out, but your core's pretty much still got stuff in it. And I got a little premature on that. Leave one of your hoses hooked up into your bucket there. And kick that cold water on real quick. It's blowing through the heat exchanger and then down and out. The heat exchanger's not that big, so it's not going to be a whole lot of water running through there. And then shut your port down, disconnect your hose. Now, if I was outside, I could just open these things, both of them wide open, and just blow water all out everywhere. But since I'm inside our training center, I don't want water all over the floor, so I'm not going to really do that. But here again, I didn't put any of the descaler in there. I was basically just circulating water the whole time we were filming. But yeah, turn those valves off, put your caps back on. These caps do have a little rubber ring in there, and they can hold back that water pressure, but I wouldn't trust them. Just use that as a second little safety procedure. I've seen a lot of guys just put these caps on, leave those valves wide open. You could get a drip later on. But then you can turn the water back on to the house. You have pretty much done the full maintenance thing. You're using that air compressed air to blow out any kind of soot, bugs, dirt. If anything tried to build a nest in here, that's why you went through all of that. Most of your water heaters, you're probably not going to take all that. You're not have to. You probably can blow most of it out from here, most of it out from that fan motor. If your fan looks good and you're not getting dirt and dust out of the top vent, you're probably going to be all right on the dirt and dust and stuff. But that's basically it. We're shut off. Make sure you turn everything back on, your power switch, your gas valve, and then go ahead and fire that heater up using your TMP here. Make sure it comes on, make sure it runs, make sure all your valves are on, because the worst thing in the world is when you get about 10 miles down the road and your phone rings and it's that homeowner saying, I don't have any hot water. And it's because you did something stupid, like you left your valves off, you didn't turn your gas on, you didn't turn the power on your heater, or you didn't turn the power on that controller. But make sure everything works before you leave. Don't get all excited and get on down the road and then have to go back. Or at worst, you get a call at 9 o'clock at night, you ain't got no hot water, and you got to drive 20, 30 miles to this house and find out you left a valve off. It's horrible. Well, that's going to do it for this episode on how to descale, flush out, or clean out your tankless water heater. I hope you learned something. I hope I didn't struggle too much, because we just went back to this model, and it's been quite a few years since I have worked on one of these, but I know the basics of it, and I was able to put it all back together, and it still works. Now, as a homeowner, if you want to descale your water heater, it's perfectly fine. Most manufacturers don't have a problem with you doing that. You can go to a plumbing supply house somewhere and you can buy these kits. Most of the time they have them right there on the shelf. It comes with everything you need. They are a little expensive, but paying a plumber to come out and do this is a lot more expensive than that kit. Or you could just buy you a 5-gallon bucket, go to the hardware store, get you one of those little pumps that's meant for like a goldfish pond or something, and then you could just use white vinegar. But me as a plumber, if I'm selling this as a service, I'm going to use what the manufacturer recommends, and that is that descaling agent. So have fun and good luck out there.